I want to welcome you all to next in our series of GHS Grand Zooms. I mean, we're really proud to do these things. We try to make many of them topical, and you can't get more topical than this because we've got in a week and a half the 151st Open coming up at Royal Liverpool, of course. And you've seen him. Some of you have seen him on the screen right now, so he is here with us. Is Blyth Bell. I mean, he is the club historian. He is a retired physician. He is a golfer. He was a 1978 university champion. He was the club champion at Royal Liverpool, captain at Royal Liverpool. I mean, that's special. And he has written this book, and I'm not doing this as a plug, but I'm doing this because it's one of my favorite books, A Hoylake Celebration. Royal Liverpool Golf Club, 1869 to 2019. I use it for research all the time, not just the stories and the details about events and goings on and just culture in golf through the years, but the imaging is incredible. So it's an incredible book. So anyway, I'm going to let Blyth say hello, but Blyth, because I've got control of the buttons, I'm going to steal this back from you in a second, and I'm going to do a little bit of the early history of the Open, and then let you take it away with the stuff nobody knows, and it's like, knock my socks off.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much for your introduction. As far as the book's concerned, it's all sold out, so it's now a collector's copy, which is good. But you take it away, George, and I'll join in when you run out.
We're gonna do some screen sharing. The best golfers of the 1840s and 1850s were the professional golfers. And who were the professional golfers? Those were the caddies and keepers of the green and some of the ball and club makers. And certainly the top players were people playing money matches for big sums of money. And so the people that you had in the 40s and especially the 50s, 1850s, were, Allen Robertson, generally considered to be the best of that era, but there were also the Dunn brothers, Tom Morris, the Parks. So there was a lot of competitions, and as good as Allen Robertson was, when he got near his old age, 44, I think is when he passed in 1859. He was very loath to play individual matches against Willie Park and Old Tom. Old Tom wasn't old then, but in 1860, there were questions about who might be the best, and that partly birthed the Open in 1860. I keep this print. It's a large print, and there are a lot of recent copies, but I just use it as a reference sometimes. I just like hanging it in my area that I collect my British Open-related stuff. And here is Willie Park Sr., who, wearing the belt that he had won 1860. The early years clearly were dominated. They were all at Prestwick because that's where the Open started. The first year actually wasn't open. There were only 8 pros, and Willie Park was the winner. And this is Willie Park on the left. But he basically traded, one was first, one was second, and with Old Tom. So basically, you look at the years, 60, 63, 66 for, Willie Park Sr., 61, 62, 64, 67. They traded off. And Andrew Strath stuck his nose in there in 1865, so that's the one that wasn't won by a Parker Morris. It is kind of interesting, you look at this print. Willie Park also won in 1875 when the tournament went back to Prestwick, and isn't given credit on this, so it's kind of they made a mistake. I don't think there are any other mistakes, but they made a mistake on the inaugural winner, which is kind of interesting. But then you see young Tommy, as you know, won it 3 times in a row, 68, 69, and 70. Now, young Tommy obviously grew up at Prestwick, so he'd probably played the course a lot of times, but he was obviously a great player wherever he was. So after he won 3 times, he retired the belt. He got to keep the belt, and so they didn't have a trophy. And so in 1870, when the championship was canceled, and here's a little blurb about that. Well, now they needed a new trophy, and 3 clubs got together: the Prestwick people, the St. Andrews people, and the Honorable Company, which had been stationed at Leith, but in 1836 had moved to Musselburgh. And so they were playing there. A lot of clubs were playing at that course as Leith got crowded, and it was a better course out there, a little off to the east. And so that was going to be the new Rota. Those three clubs bought the Claret Jug. And it wasn't quite ready in 1872, but they engraved young Tom Morris's because he won his fourth in a row, still at Prestwick. And Prestwick was the first of the Rota. It then moved to St. Andrews, where Tom Kidd won in 1873, and then it moved next on the Rota, Musselburgh, which was Honorable Company. And the reason I say all this stuff, and then next time it would go back to Prestwick again. That was the three-section rotation. And Old Willie Park won in 75, and that was his fourth and final. It's kind of interesting if you look at Jamie Anderson. He won 3 years in a row right after that. So he would have retired the jug. So it's pretty good they decided not to retire the jug. But instead they started giving medals in 1872. So the first medal went to young Tom. And no more, the Claret Jug was there, but the winner, and you'll hear it now at the end of the tournament, you'll hear the champion golfer of the year and the winner of the gold medal. I mean, those are the exact words they always use, and that's what you win. You win the gold medal. And this happens to be Mungo Park's gold medal for winning in 1874 at Musselburgh. And one of the reasons I show it, and that's what the first medals look like, from 1872, young Tom Morris's, out until 1891, that's what they look like. Now, if you hold them side by side, they're all slightly different sizes, but they have the same appearance, and they're silver with a gold gilt. They aren't solid gold. So in 1892, this was a year where a lot of stuff happened. The Rota came back to Honorable Company, who was at Musselburgh. But they, in 1891, had started building a course called Muirfield. And so they took the Open with them, to the great dismay of the Musselburgh people. And so they said, no, we're having the Open here. And we're going to get people playing ours instead of the Muirfield Open, because we are going to raise the total purse from 30 pounds to 100 pounds, give the winner 30 pounds, and we're going to give an actual gold medal. And this is the gold medal that was given in 1892 at what is the Golf Championship at Musselburgh. But Muirfield and the Honorable Company, they raised theirs to 110 pounds and gave the winner 35. And then Musselburgh said, okay, we relent. We'll move our tournament up a week. And so they had it there, and Willie Park Jr. won. He also won the actual official Open in 87, 89. But so somebody else won the non-standard medal in 1892. And as another aside, when I was looking for these things, I went through, there's a great book called Golf Book East Lothian. And I'm going, and it's an incredible book about the early history of Edinburgh and areas east of that. And I see a hand drawing of a medal, and it says 1892 winner's medal. And I go, okay, where is it? I got to have it. I mean, that is the missing link to the styles, and it's a one-off. And it looks just like this. And the reason it looks just like this is a medal made for the Honorable Company. That is what their winter medal looked like. And so having to come up with a gold medal in 1892, like Musselburgh did, they made a duplicate of their society medal and awarded that to the 1892 winner. And I've always wanted to know where that medal was, and I wanted to try to get it in my collection if any way possible. And now we're going to learn more about it in a minute. Last few seconds of this is, from 1893 onward, all the British Open winners' medals look like this. This happens to be 1949, when Bobby Locke won in a very interesting tournament. In 49, the first of his four. What's also interesting is, since 49, the lowest amateur gets a silver medal, same look. And this has to be Frank Stanley. He won the 49 first one, and he was like 5-time low am. He was actually second outright to Hogan in 53. And the last thing I'll show you is this medal right here. In 1914, Varden won his sixth Open, the most anybody had won. And no tournaments in 15, 16, 17, or 18 because of World War I. Well, the war, actually, the last shots of the war were November 11th, 1918, but the armistice wasn't even signed till the week of June 1919. Well, that same week, they held a tournament that they were trying to get ready and make it the Open. It was at St. Andrews, but they didn't have time to set all the qualifying up, so it was the unofficial Open of 1919. And what they did was they invited the top 60 players plus a few extras to play in the 1919 event. That's the Open that almost happened. And I'm going to turn it over to Blythe and let him take it away. And hopefully I didn't bore you with the prehistory, but now it gets interesting.
Okay, many thanks, George. It's difficult to know where to start, really, but I think you should start at the beginning. And just to give you a little bit of the background of Hoylake and Royal Liverpool Golf Club, if you just give me the first slide,
Sure.
George. In 1869, golf in England was hardly known, really, and Westward Ho had started a few years earlier. There had always been golf down in London, but the golf was pretty new to the English. And at that time, the city of Liverpool was absolutely booming. It was the second city of the empire. It traded everything with everywhere, and cotton, sugar, grain, everything. People, huge liner shipping businesses grew up in Liverpool. And with that commerce and trade came lots of people from all over the place, and the population expanded exponentially, and it attracted men from all over the world, and it attracted many Scots who came down to make their fortunes and trade with the rest of the world. And fortunately, they, like in a lot of places, they brought their game with them, and golf for many of them was their game. So they found a spot in 1869. I think it was less than 20 of them got together, the founder members. I think they were predominantly Scots. They decided that there was a bit of a ground out on the Wirral Peninsula that might be suitable for the game of golf. One of the early men, the first captain, actually, he was a little bearded man called James Muir Dowie, and he was originally from the east of Scotland, and he came down, and he was the son-in-law of Robert Chambers in St Andrews. You may have heard of Robert Chambers, but so he was the first captain, and they started a club, and they invited George Morris, who was Tom Morris's brother, a lesser professional, really, and he was in Robert Chambers' service at that time. And his son, Robert Chambers Jr., came down with George Morris, and they built a 9-hole golf course, and that was the beginnings of the Royal Liverpool Golf Club. And its rise was meteoric, really. These men had the vision at the beginning that they wanted to make a golf club that would rival St Andrews and Prestwick. And that was their vision from day one. And they weren't to be thwarted at all. And they were men of ambition and wealth and great foresight in many ways. And they made it happen. So in 1871, the course was extended to 18 holes, and it had royal patronage. So it became Royal Liverpool Golf Club within 2 years. And it was an 18-hole course, and it was a proper golf course, and they had proper players. And it became a bit of a hotbed of golf, really. And the one thing I like about Royal Liverpool is that it's still predominantly a golfer's club, and golf is the main thing, and it's all about the golf. And I hope it stays that way. But so the club progressed, and it was a very encouraging club, and lots of local boys took up the game, and we were blessed with fantastic early players that I'll go on to later. And it really became the cradle of English golf administratively, and as far as playing the game really was concerned. This picture is a very interesting picture. It's a print from an oil by Francis Powell Hopkins from 1881. That's one of our captains playing in the middle, called John Dunn. But the chap standing bottom right, second bottom right, talking to the other one, that's him, yeah. That's Alan McPhee. And that brings in the story of the first amateur championship, which took place in 1885. And there had been attempts in the 1850s to start an annual tournament, a great tournament, and a great amateur tournament. And there were two attempts, 58 and 59, it was called the Grand Annual Tournament in St Andrews, but it didn't really take off. And the last event was a sort of foursomes inter-club event that it got in the way of the spring and autumn meeting at the RNA, and they hummed and hawed about it, and the RNA were reluctant to promote it, if you like. So in 1885, the men at Hoylake got together and canvassed some support and started the amateur championship, really. And that was 1885. So 44 players played, and in 1885, Alan McPhee, he was actually Scottish as well, although he resided at Hoylake. He was part of the McPhee Graham sugar dynasty. They were originally from the west of Scotland. They all came down from Glasgow, and they made fortunes in sugar refining. And he became the first amateur champion. And the amateur championship's been going ever since. And we've hosted the amateur championship on 18 occasions, more than any other club. And it's now a wonderful international tournament. But the correspondence relating to the inception of the amateur championship is very interesting. But the other thing that this picture shows is the building on the right is the Royal Hotel, and that was the clubhouse, really, of the Royal Liverpool Golf Club until the 1890s. And they used rooms at the Royal Hotel to dine in and drink in and speak in after the golf for 25 years before they built our wonderful clubhouse. But you can see there's a little bit of artist license in the picture, but it's very Hopkins. The figures are very recognizable. And Hoylake's a flat links. It's got a little bit of interest once you get up into the higher land, but it's predominantly flat links. That gives it its mood, really. It's sort of minimalism, and it gives it its shape, and it doesn't have much character, but the flatness and the sort of austerity of it all is a character within itself. So that was the beginnings of Royal Liverpool Golf Club and the first amateur championship. Okay, this is a lovely picture. This is from the 1890s, really, and I think it's 1894, and this is from a watercolor by Michael Brown, the great Scottish artist, golfing artist. He did a painting every year, usually a watercolor or a colored pen and ink sketch, and he used these pen and ink sketches to make prints annually for the Life Association of Scotland. And I'm sure you've seen, they were issued every year, and the centerpiece of the calendar was, the golfing view of the year. And this is the golfing view of 1894. And this is a golfer called John Ball Jr., who you may have heard about, probably, arguably, perhaps, the greatest amateur golfer of all time. But and he's playing out of a bunker there, a sort of sand scrape, and it's called Playing to the Briars. He's playing with Harold Hilton on his left. Also in the foursome is Leslie Balfour Melville and James Laidley, and they were four of the preeminent amateurs of the day. But everyone else paled into insignificance compared to Ball and Hilton. These amateurs were incredibly good players, and at a time when professional golf and the Open Championship was dominated by Scottish professionals. In 1890, John Ball Jr. went up to Prestwick to play in the Open Championship. Somewhat remarkably, he won the Open Championship. And that's a picture of him, a portrait that's on our landing at Hoylake. I think it's a fantastic picture. He was a quiet man. He was softly spoken. He never said much. He never commented. He'd give a few words every now and again, but and he was revered by the local people at Hoylake, who would, they would go to the ends of the earth to follow John Ball playing golf. And so he went up to Prestwick in 1890, and he won the Open Championship, and that's the Open Championship medal of 1890, very similar to the one that George showed on the left of his collection. So it was 36 holes at that time. It didn't become 72 holes until 1892. John Ball Jr. played 2 rounds of 18. Prestwick had not long been extended to 18 holes. So they played 2 rounds of 18 holes, and John Ball's nines were 41, 41, 41, 41, for a total of 164. And he won the title by 3 shots from Willie Fernie and Archie Simpson. So this was a bombshell in the world of golf. One, to have an Englishman win the Open Championship, and another to have an amateur to win the Open Championship. So John Ball, he had a very, very long career, and he went on to win 8 amateur championships. The last one was in 1912. And a very, very long career. He was a relentless golfer, often did quite well in the Open Championship, but he really excelled as a match player. And Bernard Darwin was in awe of John Ball, and he thought that John Ball had the most beautiful swing of them all. John Ball's was truly a beautiful swing, he said, and the most beautiful of all. And it was rhythmic, and you don't really see that with the bronze we've got there. And he had what they call a Palmer grip, which was a very sort of strong right hand and a sort of crooked elbow. But the few pictures we have of John Ball actually in action, his swing's pretty much on plane, and he's a strong man and he's a good player. So John Ball of Hoylake, John Ball Jr., and his achievements alone elevated the club in many ways. That's an image of the amateur championship medal. That's one of John Ball's that we've got, and that's very much, it is identical really to the medals that we give out today. A gold, a silver, and 2 bronze medals every amateur championship. Just a quick aside, I was up at Hillside a couple of weeks ago for this year's amateur championship. The golf that they played was unbelievable. And I don't know what John Ball would think of it, to be honest, but there was a big South African called Christian Lambrecht who won, and he's 6'8", and he's a complete giant of a man, and he's studying at Georgia Tech, so look out for him. But the amateur championship, is now truly global, and the winner gets a place at the Open. You've probably all seen these. These are from the Vanity Fair magazine. Every edition of Vanity Fair had a pull-out man of the time, and most of them were done by an artist, caricaturist called Spy, but this one of John Ball was done by Lib. He was known as Lib, and I think it was Librio Prosperio, his name was. He was an Italian, and but I just love this picture of John Ball, and this sort of stooped, trudging, relentless unflinching man that he was, and I would have loved to see him play golf. I really would. So he was one of the men that made put Hoylake on the map, and he was closely followed 7 years later. He was 7 years older than Harold Hilton, and this is an oil picture we have of Harold Hilton. And Harold Hilton was born in 1869, Christmas Eve, 1869, and he grew up at Hoylake, and he was a very good rugby football player, and he was also a very good golfer. He was the complete opposite of Ball. He was nervous and quick and jumpy, and he had a sort of staccato up and down swing, and he sort of swished along, and his hat fell off after he'd hit his shots. And he was the complete antithesis of John Ball, but he was arguably more successful in some ways. So Hilton was fairly young, so he would be early 20s. He was 23, and he hadn't won any amateur championships, but he had done reasonably well. He was a very promising player, and at the last minute he decided to go north to Muirfield for the 1892 Open Championship. And as George mentioned before, Muirfield was a new venue in 1892. It was a busy time for them. There were lots of changes in golf, and Muirfield wasn't universally accepted. It wasn't very popular when they first built it. And I think it was Andrew Kirkcaldy that described it as an old water meady, and it was too much grass, and it wasn't really like a links. Anyway, the Muirfield was the venue for the 1892 Open Championship. So Harold Hilton went up there, and it was an Open in many ways that were dominated by amateurs. I think Horace Hutchinson led after the first round. John Ball led after the second or third round. This was the first Open Championship to be played over 72 holes. So it was the first 4-round championship of the Open. Harold Hilton had a great last round. He holed from off the green, I think it was 2 or 3 times on the first 9 holes, and he had a 75 in the final round that was a sort of early course record for the time, and went on to win the Open Championship. So thus becoming the second amateur and the second Englishman to win the Open Championship. As George mentioned before, this medal is produced by the Honourable Company, very similar to the medal that George mentioned. And in 1893, the sort of management of the Open Championship changed, and there was a feeling amongst the clubs, the Honourable Company, the RNA and Prestwick, that the Open needed to be a little bit more organized and a little bit more cohesive, because it was sort of run by these 3 clubs in a sort of, in their own way, if you like. And so there was a sort of quest for unification, and the RNA sort of were dragged into it as the organizers of the Open Championship. And so in 1893, they had an Open Championship committee for the first time. And at that meeting in 1893, it was generally accepted that the Open Championship should be staged in England. There was a wish to extend the Open Championship to venues in England. And so it was that the 1894 Championship was played at Sandwich, St George's, and the 1897 Championship was to be played at Hoylake, Royal Liverpool. And that brings us on to the 1897 Championship. So just a quickie, when you're watching the Open this year, some people refer to it as Royal Liverpool, and some people will say, oh, he won at Hoylake. And the people say, well, what's the difference between Hoylake and Royal Liverpool? And it's very much like, thinking about Muirfield, and the links are Muirfield, and the golf club is the Honourable Company of Edinburgh Golfers, and our links is in the village of Hoylake, or the little town of Hoylake. People refer to it historically as Hoylake, but it is Royal Liverpool Golf Club. So don't get confused. That's some people will get confused, but so that's the difference. But so this is one of my favorite pictures. This is Harold Hilton. So Harold Hilton was, having won the 1892 Open Championship. The Open then came to Hoylake in 1897, and Hilton played exceptionally well, and he went on to win the Open in 1897. He had a great last round, and he sort of stuttered a little bit on the back nine into the win, but he sort of held it together. He was a terrier of a golfer, tenacious. He was unbending, really. And he got to the last hole, and he knocked his second on the green, and he had a 4 for a 75, which he knew would be in the frame. He was one of the earlier starters. He ran his first putt. He described the last green as a glassy surface, and Hoylake's a very dry links. In the glassy surface, he knocked it about 3 or 4 feet past, and he said he can still see he wrote in his 1907 book, My Golfing Reminiscences, you can still see that final putt. And he said it doubled about as it crept into the back of the hole, and he said you can still see it resting on the lip like a helpless derelict, and that was how he described the final putt. And so he made his putt, he made his 75, and he got into the clubhouse, and he hung about for a bit, and he had to wait for James Braid. James Braid had to make 3 down the last to tie him, and he didn't manage to do it. He had a valiant effort, but his birdie putt just didn't go in. And so Hilton, Harold H. Hilton, Harold Horsefall Hilton, his name was our 1897 Open champion. And this is again similar to one of the medals. It's similar to the 1949 medal that George showed earlier. From the 1893 Open onwards, the medals were uniform, and they were produced by the R&A rather than the individual clubs, and those are almost identical to what the Open champion winner will get this year at Hoylake. So we were blessed with our golfers, really. We were very, very lucky. Just as a little bit of a postscript about Hilton, Hilton he was a strange man. He had lulls in his career, and he had a pretty miserable time of it at the sort of late 1905, 1906, 1907, and he suffered from arthritis and sciatica, and he smoked about 60 cigarettes a day, and things didn't look good for him. And then he sort of had a return to form in 1911, and in 1911 he won the amateur championship at Prestwick, and he also almost won the Open Championship at Royal St George. He had a great chance to win that championship, and he faltered towards the end. So he was buoyed by his good form, and he traveled to America to play in the US Amateur in 1911 at Appoquinimans, and he led the qualifiers and won the championship. It was quite remarkable in many ways, because he was getting on a little bit. I think it was really just as American golf. This was pre-Weemots Open. There were still some very good players in America. Evans hadn't really, it was, I think Jerome Travers was one of the very good players, but Hilton won at Appoquinimans, and he played in a shirt and tie, and he sweated it out. He won at the 37th in the final. He beat Fred Herreshoff in the final. Allegedly, there are many accounts of this, but he cut his second shot at the 37th hole, and there was a bank and some rocks at the right of the green, and no one's really sure what it hit, but it hit something and careened back onto the green. And Herreshoff missed the green and couldn't get down in two, and Hilton won the championship. So that was, I think it's just a wonderful picture. He's showing the Union flag there defiantly, having won the US Amateur Championship. But, okay, so the next chapter really is I was chatting with the friend who helped me write the book, and last week, and he was saying, we were talking about big years for the club, and not all clubs, have big years every year, and sometimes nothing happens, and sometimes a lot of stuff happens. And in 1902, a lot of stuff happened at Hoylake. So we had the 1902 Open Championship, and that's a picture of Sandy Herd from St Andrews, a St Andrian, a native St Andrian, who had a great record in the championship, and he went on to win the 1902 championship, and it's really remembered for being the first Open Championship that the winner played with the wound Haskell ball. And the story goes that in practice, he played with John Ball Jr. That's a great picture of the Haskell ball. So he played in practice, in a practice round, he played with John Ball Jr. And Ball was playing with the Haskell. And there was quite a lot of controversy in the periodicals of the day, and it really, some people were saying it was better, and some people were saying it wasn't, and some people were saying it was too expensive, and so there was a lot of toing and froing going on, but he borrowed a Haskell ball during practice, the practice round with John Ball. He borrowed one from John Ball, and he played a few holes with it, and he thought, this is okay. It went further than the gutta percha ball, and he quite liked it. So he went in, after his round, he went into the pro shop, and he saw George Morris, who was actually the nephew of old Tom Morris, and sorry, Jack Morris was our professional. His father was George Morris, and the nephew of old Tom. And he asked him if he had any Haskell balls, and Jack Morris was sort of rationing them, and he said, I've only got 4 left. And so Sandy Herd hoovered them up and went on to hoover up the championship. So the first champion to win with the Haskell ball, which is a bit of a milestone, but again, a very popular champion. He was closely followed by Varden and Braid, of the great triumvirate Varden, Braid and Taylor, and they were to figure in a lot of our early Open Championships, but we'll go on to that later. But next slide, George. Okay, this fantastic picture. So this is our artist again, Michael Brown, and I was telling you earlier about the pictures he did for the Life Association of Scotland, and this is the original picture that he did for the 1902 calendar. And it's really a pen and ink sketch that he did. And the attention to detail is amazing. And you can see all they're easily recognizable. Balfour is driving off, Hilton's to the left of Balfour, Charles Hutchings is in the white suit with the cap on the right. The Horace Hutchinson's there behind Ball. Ball is just behind watching the play, and Horace Hutchins, that's him, yeah. Horace Hutchinson, and the far left is the very far left watching is Bernard Darwin. So there's a picture of Bernard Darwin there as well. So this is the first international match. So this is the first ever match that took place between two countries. So England played Scotland in 1902, and this was also initiated by our club, and it was a forerunner of the home international series, which is still going on today. It was a bit of a milestone, and Scotland won, and there was great controversy because one of our great players, a chap called Jack Graham Jr., he was born in England, but he was of Scottish descent, and he opted to play for Scotland. And this was a dreadful thing, and they said that, he was born and bred in England, he should play for England, but his heart was Scottish, and he joined the right team anyway because Scotland easily defeated the English. But so that was the first international match. But it's one of my favourite pictures. You can see that was our clubhouse. It's about 7 or 8 years old at that time, pretty much as it is today. We don't have the balcony anymore. So not much has changed as far as that's concerned, and you'll easily recognise it when you see it at the Open. This is 1907 Open. This is Arnold Massey. He won the 1907 Open, the first player from continental Europe ever to win the championship. He was a Frenchman. He was a Basque. He was from the Basque country, and he was a fantastic golfer, a strong little man, and he lived a lot of his life in Edinburgh and played at North Berwick. But again, it was a windy, miserable conditions. Massey prevailed. He went on to call his daughter Hoylake. That's just an aside. And he died in Edinburgh. He was a great player, and we're glad to have him as a champion. Okay, we get on to this is just pre-war. So this is 1913, the Illustrated London News. I mentioned before that the great triumvirate had challenged for Open Championships at Hoylake, but this was the first one and the only one that was won by anyone from the great triumvirate. And this was won by G.H. Taylor, and you can see G.H. Taylor there. Again, it was a windy Open, and there was a gale of wind, and the third round, the scoring was quite high, and in the third round, G.H. Taylor went round in 77, and Bernard Darwin wrote in the Times that it was the best round that he'd ever witnessed, and everyone else was in the 80s, and he completely spread eagled the field, and he won by 8 shots in the end. So that was J.H. Taylor, and yes, it would have been dreadful if we hadn't had at least one of the great triumvirate winning an Open at Hoylake. So he was a great champion. Just below him on the sketch there in the middle, that's Johnny McDermott. Johnny McDermott, the American people will know everything about Johnny McDermott, but he won the US Open champion. He was the first US born US Open champion, and most of them were Scots, the early ones. But he was the first US born champion in 1911 and 1912, and he came over to the Open at Hoylake in 1913 and acquitted himself very well. The press of the day, I'm not sure if they didn't like foreigners or if they were wary of Americans or whatnot, but they always had something to say. It was the same when Travis came over for the amateur championship at Sandwich, and they weren't sure what to make of McDermott. But anyway, I think he finished 5th in the championship and did very well. But he had a very sad end to his life, as a lot of these men did, really, certainly in the early years. George mentioned Jamie Anderson, who won 3 Opens consecutively, and Jamie Anderson died as a sort of destitute alcoholic, and many of them, just caddied and drank and died young. So I think Johnny McDermott ended up in an asylum, I believe. But it wasn't a healthy time, and they didn't lead healthy lives. And times were hard, and life expectancy was low. So that was 1913. So then we had the Great War.
Hey, Blythe, can I interrupt you for a second? You can just have a sip of water or something, because I can't help but butt in. And,
of course.
Because you mentioned
a natural break would be fine.
Okay,
absolutely fine.
You mentioned J.H. Taylor, so I got to throw in some J.H. Taylor stuff, just an aside.
Yeah, no, do that.
You mentioned Arno Massey coming the first non-Brit to win the Open. So I'll just hold this one up. It's a little shiny, but it works. J.H. Taylor, let me pop it out. This is the winner's medal for the 1908 French Open, which was won by J.H. Taylor, and he was so pleased. He was not a rich man, but he built this silver surround to put in his house that says, Open Championship in France, J.H. Taylor score, and he beat Massey. So that was his revenge, and he was really happy about it. You mentioned the 1913 win at your place, J.H. Taylor, and that was his 5th win. And he, in appreciation, here's a picture of J.H. Taylor. What's kind of cool is the bottom of the plaque says, presented by the Mid-Surrey Caddies. So the caddies of the club, in recognition of his wonderful achievement in winning the Open Golf Championship for the 5th time, July 1913. So that was kind of cool. Anyway, I'm going to get you back on track post World War I.
Okay. So we've had the war, and the war, they call it the Great War. There's nothing great about any war, but it decimated our economy. It killed an awful lot of our young men, and it sort of broke the spirit of the country, if you like. And it took us a long time to get going. We didn't have any golf. We didn't have any championships, and we sort of emerged, as George sort of alluded to, about 1919, and there weren't really any championships until 1920, and it took us a long time to get going. And so in 1921, the America didn't have such problems, really. The Roaring Twenties and the great confidence of the golden era of American sports, and it was fantastic in America. And George Fones decided that he'd like to bring a team to play internationally, an amateur team of golfers. Bill Fones from Oakmont, and he'd already taken a team to Canada. I think it was 1919 or 1920 to play a match against Canada, and he was desperate to bring a team over in 1921 to play against Great Britain and Ireland. And there was a bit of toing and froing up at St Andrews, and they sort of decided that America helped us win the war, so it would be a shame not to grant them a game of golf. So they came over, and it coincided with the 1921 amateur championship at Hoylake. It was played on the eve of the championship. So here you see Fones is on the left, Jaywood Platt, Wemett, Jess Guilford in the middle, the Boston Siege Gun, and a very young Bobby Jones. Bobby Jones was just a few weeks past his 19th birthday at that time, and he's just, he's just bouncing. He just can't wait to get at it. And the guy on the right said, a doctor from California called Paul Hunter. But so that's them. I can't work out if they're leaving or arriving, but I think they're probably leaving. So they're probably sailing from New York. But so they sailed to Liverpool. Chick Evans was on the team. He came later. You can see Chick Evans top right, and so I think that is probably arguably the best US team to come out of America. I think, you know, if you look at all their achievements and everything they've won, amateurs and US Opens, and they were a tremendous group of players. And Darwin was very keen to see Bobby Jones. He had all the press, and he was the one everyone wanted to see. And they absolutely battered the Great Britain team. 2 or 3 of them had served in the war. A couple of them were wounded. Interestingly, on the UK team, it wasn't called GB&I then, because, you know, Irish independence didn't come till 1921, so that was all going on at this time. Yes, so they played a team, absolutely battered us, and went on to play in the amateur championship. None of them were successful in the amateur championship. It was dried out, and Bobby Jones described, having to throw buckets of water onto the turf to make it even moderately receptive, and none of them could play a chip and run shot, and they struggled. So Willie Hunter won the championship, and then they went up to St Andrews and played in the Open Championship, and that was where Bobby Jones had played well for 2.5 rounds, and famously failed to complete the 11th hole, the short hole, the Eden hole. And there are varying accounts of why that happened, whether he took too many shots, or whether he tore up his card, or whether he just walked off in disgust. There were lots of accounts, but anyway, he didn't complete, and he was very embarrassed when he came in, and went on to play in the final round, nevertheless. And I think he had a 75 in the final round, although it didn't count because he NR'd in the third round. But so that was the first time Bobby Jones was at Hoylake in 1921, and it was the first time he was in St Andrews, but he would visit us again, thankfully. And that was the forerunner of the Walker Cup. So George Herbert Walker had already made the Walker Cup by the time that match had picked up, but it hadn't. Walker's original intention was to make it an international golf tournament, rather than a Great Britain-US match. And but it soon became, the press dubbed it the Walker Cup, and it soon became the Walker Cup, and it's been the Walker Cup ever since, really. And we've hosted the Walker Cup a couple of times, 83, and we had one in 2019 in our 150th anniversary, which was fantastic. The strength of the US in the singles, saw out the day both times, and we were competitive for a while, but weren't nearly good enough. So we'll see what happens this year at St Andrews. But next slide, George. Okay, this is 1924. So this is the great man himself, Walter Hagen, and he won at Hoylake in 1924, which was the second of his 4 Open Championships. He had a great tussle with an English player called Ernest Whitcomb, and Hagen sort of always did enough, really, and he had to come back, and I think it was 37 or something like that, to win the championship, and he got it up and down from everywhere, and he just eked it out, by hook or by crook. And I love that picture. That's him kissing his wife Edna, his second wife, and Darwin did an account of that Open Championship, and he said, well, he says the story was as it always was. He said Hagen just won, and the other man just didn't. I think that sums up Walter Hagen. But, so he won in 24, and he also won in 28 and 29. So Jones won in 26 at Lytham. He won in 27 at St Andrews. And next slide, George. And he won at 1930 at Hoylake. So between them, Hagen and Jones, they won 5 consecutive Open Championships, and which is quite remarkable, really. And this is so Jones came down to Hoylake for the Open Championship, having won the Amateur Championship at St Andrews, and this was the big year when everyone thought he was going to win everything, and he's had a great start to the season. He won a pro tournament and finished second in another, and they were starting to mention what he was capable of. And so he came over for the amateur at St Andrews, and the amateur at St Andrews was fascinating in a way, because Jones probably wasn't at his very best, but by hook or by crook, whether he just managed to eke out each round, and he beat Tolley in the second round at the 19th. He had a great match in the semi-final with the American George Foyt, and by the time he got to the final, he easily beat Roger Weatherhead. So he came down to Hoylake as champion, and so this was the second leg of the British double, if you like. And so he came to Hoylake, and he had a fairly moderate qualifying. They all played 36 holes qualifying in those days, and he had a fairly moderate. He had a 73 at Hoylake and a 77 at Wallasey, and he finished about 15th or 20th or something. And and they said he was out of sorts and whatnot. And at Hoylake that night, there was a reporter for the Glasgow Herald, and he asked Jones's caddy, Jock McIntyre from Edinburgh, who Jones usually used when he came over, and he asked him about Jones's round at Wallasey, and McIntyre said, well, there'll be no 77s at Hoylake, he said, and sure enough, Jones didn't have anything like a 77, but so he got off to a great start. He started slowly in his first 3 rounds, really, and then he sort of recovered as he went on. And so he was 70, 72, 74. And the third round, Archie Compston, a big, tall golfer from the West Country, southwest of England, had a 68, and which worried everyone, if you like. And I think it actually put him into the lead against Jones. But he was out quite early in the afternoon, and he started dreadfully and completely blew it under the pressure. But Jones had a bit of luck when he started, and he had a spectator at the second in the final round and sort of carooned into a bunker, and he got a good lie, and he hit the approach shot onto the green, hold it for a 3, and he was level par, minding his own business, doing everything right. And he came to our par hole, which will be the 10th for the championship, which is our usual 8th, the par 5. It's a sort of raised green with a runoff on the left, and he had 2 fantastic shots just to the left edge of the green down the swale, from where he contrived to take a 7. And he had a chip which came back to his feet, and he sort of chipped it on, and it went past the hole, and from where he 3-putted and made 7. And he was in a complete daze. And Darwin said an old lady with a hockey stick could have done much better. Anyway, he made his way home, and he dropped shots at the par 3s on the second 9, but he birdied both of the par 5s, and the last par 5, which is now our finishing hole, he was in a greenside bunker and used the sand wedge that he'd only used once before in the championship. It's a bit like the Saracen wedge when it first came out, and he had a downhill line. He just nipped it perfectly and knocked it out to a few inches, finished 4-4, and then went into the clubhouse to see if anyone could beat him. He was in the first third of the draw, so there was quite a lot of people to come in. So they poured him a large glass of scotch. He waited and waited and waited, and the only people coming to the end that had a chance of beating him were McDonald Smith and Leo Deagle. And by the end, they both needed birdie finishes, and neither of them could do it. Jones won the Open Championship. The second leg of the impregnable quadrilateral. So that's Bobby Jones. We're very, very fortunate to have Bobby Jones as our champion. And these are the original scorecards. I don't know if you can enlarge it a bit, George. You can see the scorecard on the right. You might not be able to get across there, but so he had a 7 at the 8th hole. But if you see the draw on the left, one of the most difficult questions in golf is, who did Bobby Jones play in the last round at Hoylake with in the 1930 Open? And he actually played with a Frenchman called Pierre Hilloyen, and from Chantilly, and so not many people know that, but it's a sort of trivia quiz, but trivia question. So we're delighted, and most of our connections to this date, and we're pretty well connected, and all of our US connections, a lot of them are on the back of Bobby Jones's Grand Slam. And I've been to Atlanta quite a lot of times. I've been to Marion a lot of times, and the Bobby Jones connection is a huge thing for us. Shall we move on? Right. We come to a sort of, I always think the Open at Hoylake mirrors the sort of history of the Open, and between the wars, once Jones and Hagen stopped coming, between the wars, it was a pretty colloquial, parochial, dull affair in many ways. As Saracen played in 1936. But many of the great players of the day, and certainly the American players, didn't come for a while. So between the wars it's also the name of a book by Bernard Darwin. But so this is Alf Padgham in 1936, who won our Open Championship, a completely forgotten Open champion, really. Although he was a great player, and like many players, this picture's from later in his life, but his career was shortened by the war, really, the Second War. And this is 1947 championship, which is just after the Second War, and this is Fred Daly, the first Irishman to win the Open Championship. There have been several since, but and our most recent champion is an Irishman. And I just love this picture because of the mirth and the happiness and the sheer joy on the faces of his supporters as they sort of hoist Fred up on their shoulders, and you could just imagine them all going down and drinking pints and pints of Guinness and singing well into the night. But so Fred Daly, I met Fred Daly a couple of times, and he was an interesting man. I liked him a lot. He was a real character. So he won in 1947. Henry Cotton had a chance in both 36 and 47, and he led going into the final round both occasions, but he didn't win either of them. And it would have been nice to have Cotton. He was the sort of leading light of the day for the British golfers. So that was 1947. I like this. This is a a little caricature by a sort of painter, writer called George Houghton. Maybe you've heard of him. He did a series of golf books, amusing books with little cartoons in them. And this is one. This is a picture we've got of Fred Daly. There were two of them that came up at auction. There was one of Daly and one of DiVincenzo, and I really liked them. So we've got them both displayed together in the club. So that was Fred Daly in the 1947 Open. Okay, going to 56. So lucky enough to get Peter Thomson. Peter Thomson won 5 Open Championships, and he won his 3rd Open Championship at Hoylake in 1956, comfortably. Won it by 3 shots from the Belgian, Flory van Donk. And so this was his hat trick of Opens, 54, 55, 56. He also won it in 58 and 65 at Birkdale. But so this is there's an interesting story behind this, because he didn't have a jacket with him for the presentation, and he had to borrow a jacket from a member. So that's not Peter Thomson's jacket. That's one of our members' jacket he's got on. And he thanked the member after the presentation and gave him back the jacket. And the member took the jacket home. And when he had it cleaned, he noticed there was a check in the pocket. And the check was Peter Thomson's check for winning the Open. It was a fairly paltry amount. I can't remember how much it was. It was, but Peter Thomson obviously didn't think it was worth enough to bother about cashing the check. But he sent it back to him anyway. But he was a lovely man, Peter Thomson. He was a true gentleman. He came to Hoylake quite a few times, and great company, a real gentleman of the game, and he was a great player. 1967. So Roberto DiVincenzo. So the Open in 1967 is getting a bit bigger, and I think that, going from 56 to 67, the big thing that happened was Arnold Palmer. And Arnold Palmer coming to the Open Championship in the early 60s, and his wins, his consecutive wins at Troon and then Birkdale, sort of lit up the championship really and gave it a bit of impetus that it was sadly lacking. And and then Nicklaus came. Player had been there for a while anyway, and golf became more popular. The game was getting more popular. It was getting big in America. The big three were growing golf, and the Masters was being televised, and everything was happening. So the Open was starting to get higher profile. Having said that, the 1967 Open, if you look at black and white coverage, there's not many people there really. So Jack Nicklaus and Gary Player played in the 1967 Open, but it was Roberto DiVincenzo who had a stellar record in the championship. He was forever inside the top 3 or top 4 and could never win. And in his dotage, he comes back to Hoylake and he beats Jack Nicklaus, and he hit a tremendous shot to our 16th hole, which will be the final hole in the Open, over the out of bounds with a towering 3-wood over the out of bounds onto the green to 2-putted for a birdie, and 1 by 2 from Big Jack. Gary Player led going into the last round, but and he was a lovely man, Roberto. He came over in 2000, and I met him then, and he still could play, and absolutely massive hands. He was he was a great golfer, and many of our members at Hoylake who remember the 1967 Open, they've got nothing but good words to say about him. So the next sort of thing, the Open got really big in the 70s, early 70s, and so the Nicklaus Open in 1970 at St Andrews, and then the 72 Open. Jacqueline 69 was quite big, and that sort of got things going. 71 at Birkdale, 72 at Muirfield. The crowds were getting a lot bigger. The infrastructure was just starting to get bigger. The you know, it was starting to become a real event. And it was during that time that the Open started to get bigger, that it was sort of decided that Hoylake wasn't big enough. And the demands of hosting the Open Championship sort of outgrew our capability to host it. And so we came off the list of Open Championship venues in the 60s. And so the Open then went from strength to strength, and it got bigger and bigger. And you know, the great Opens at Birkdale and Carnoustie and Lytham, and we were a bit in the doldrums. And in the late 70s, 80s weren't a good time for the UK financially, and it really hit the city of Liverpool. And the city of Liverpool was in decline. There was high unemployment, and all the heavy industry was dying, and it's a poor place. And in many ways, the fortunes of the club mirrored the fortunes of the city. So there needed to be a few things happening to get back in the frame, and we bought some land, and we sort of hosted another couple of championships, amateur championships, and we bought some more land, and we got a greenkeeper that looked after the place properly. And so our profile sort of went up a little bit into the 80s and 90s, and then end of the 90s, you know, everything was in place, and the powers that be said, you can host the 2006 Open Championship. So the 2006 Open Championship came to Hoylake, and if you haven't hosted an Open for 39 years, you're full of anxiety about how the course is going to stand up, and you know, who's going to win, and will they take it apart, and you know, what will they say about us, you know, and you know, we don't want a duffer winning the Open, and you know, it's you know, the greens aren't that good. How are they going to be for the Open? You know, it's just there's always that anxiety. So we were very, very lucky. In 2006, we had the hottest weather that we can ever have imagined. The place it wasn't just yellow. It was a sort of grey, really. It was a moonscape, and that picture sort of sums up. This is a picture of Tiger Woods walking down what's now our second hole for the championship, and it is a moonscape, and the heat was rising off the ground, and we didn't have enough water, and the greens were speeding up like crazy into the afternoon. And Tiger came to the championship, and this was the first championship he played after his father had died. He'd been playing okay, and he came to Hoylake, and the first thing he did, and looked at the weather forecast, saw the links, and he changed his ball flight. He, instead of hitting it sort of mid-traj, he hit it high traj, and started hitting these towering iron shots, and he plotted his way around the golf course. He only hit his driver once, and he didn't hit the fairway when he hit his driver, but he hit his 2-iron off just about every tee, and laid back, and he had about 170, 180, sometimes longer into some of these par fours, and he'd hit these towering mid-iron shots that came down with, you know, and just sort of flopped on the green from on high, and we were so lucky that he went on to win the championship. It was closer than everyone thought. Chris DeMarco got within one of him, and we had a fantastic leaderboard, and I thought, God, we just don't want Chris DeMarco winning the Open. As much as Chris DeMarco is a good golfer, you want Tiger Woods to win your Open, and so Tiger Woods obliged, and I was just next to him. I was escorting him from the final green, and after he'd won the championship, and he just burst into tears. He was inconsolable, and we had to wait till he stopped crying before we could take him back and record his score. But Tiger Woods was a fantastic golfer, and you want good golfers on honours board. Next one, George. Okay, so that's 14, and you all recognise Rory McIlroy. So a completely different Open, completely different conditions. It was playing much longer. It wasn't playing as fast, and I think the players, with the exception of McIlroy and some others, were too defensive, really. You know, they thought they'd play this strategic game that was successful for Tiger, and they just left themselves too far back with too long shots. And Rory took them on with the driver. He got the best of the draw. He had a sort of early first day, late second day. And it got windier at the end of the first day, and he had the best of the draw. He led from start to finish, opened with a 66, finished eagle, bogey, eagle on day 3 just to get him in front. And he had a slowish start in the last round, but and Sergio Garcia and Ricky Fowler were sort of nibbling a little bit at his heels, but they didn't really get to him, which was good. So that was our second Northern Irishman to win the championship, Rory McIlroy, and that was the last time he won a major, 2014, despite all these best efforts. So looking forward to this year, all we can hope for is some half-decent weather, no controversy whatsoever, and a classic winner. That's it. So that's it, gentlemen. That's all I've got for you.
Wow, that's more than a little bit. I mean, what hallowed grounds, and to be associated with that club and go there every day and play that. That's just amazing, and it's awesome. I might ask one question, Blythe. I shouldn't do this, but
Easy questions, please.
okay. Well, here's a question maybe you can't know, but it's pretty interesting. Like as you said, Hagen and Jones essentially won the Open in the 20s.
Yeah.
Well, Hagen won 4, Jones won 3, but Hagen won in 20, as you said, 28, 29. Did he not play in 30? And because can you imagine
No.
if Hagen had been there? Yeah, if Hagen had been there for 30, this might have been a very different year. And it always hits was Hagen. Why he didn't show up to get his triple?
That's a good question. Well, I'll tell you what. In front of me, I have the 1930 Open Championship program, and I'm just going to have a quick look at it. But my feeling is that for one reason or another, Walter Hagen didn't play in that championship.
He didn't.
And the other interesting thing about Jones and Hagen is that Hagen never won a championship that Jones played in. He never won a major championship that Jones played in, which is very interesting. But and Hagen won. He won a lot of things, but he was never successful when Jones was in the field. But I don't think he played in 1930.
That would have been it. That would have been very interesting because Hagen certainly knew how to play links courses. Anybody else? Put up a hand or unmute yourself and ask. I don't see any hand. Oh, Bern. Go ahead, Bern.
Hi, Bern.
Blythe, thanks so much. It's just an honor and a pleasure to have you with us tonight, and for the many members who will watch this recording and just be delighted to tell their friends that the guy that wrote the book on Hoy Lake was our guest. So I wanted to thank you personally, and I wanted to give you early feedback. I had a young player who called me today, and he wants to put together a set of hickory clubs. So we raced down to my collection, and he picked some clubs. And I said, hey, I only have a couple minutes. I need to turn on this Zoom call. And I said, for a change, I just get to watch. He says, can I watch too? I said, sure. Good. So young Corey Ruffing was truly enamored, and he's in a hurry to learn a lot of history of the Open now. And he would be here right now, except for he had a date that he couldn't miss. So
you don't want to miss your date.
You don't want to do that. But he was excited to say, This is one of those times where I have to leave, but I don't want to.
Well, we need young people. I joined the British Golf Collectors Society over 30 years ago when it first started, and I was one of the youngest people then, and I am sadly still one of the youngest people. Yeah. So we need young people, but we've got a couple of young people at Hoylake that are quite interested in this sort of stuff, and I'm giving them every encouragement at the moment. So
Blythe, maybe I can convince them to come and we'll set up a little match of some sort.
I'd love that. I'd love
Okay.
that. No, it's been great. Thanks for asking me.
Thank you.
Our past president, Bob Geddes, had his hand up first, so I'm going there first. What you got, Bob?
Okay.
Blythe, thanks so much for your presentations, and I really very interesting, and of course from your perspective to hear the history. You spoke a lot about John Ball's history, and I believe as an amateur, and you talked about some of the surprises of people that win either the amateur or the open.
Sure.
Of course, we're familiar with Walter Travis.
Yeah.
And winning the 1904 British Amateur.
Yeah.
From your knowledge of history, how much of a surprise was that?
It was cataclysmic, really. When Travis came over and won that, you know, I mentioned when I spoke earlier about, you know, that time in England, you know, they didn't look on, they always distrusted foreigners, and Americans were brash, and you know, they didn't like Americans, and Travis was a very slow golfer, and he wasn't universally popular in many ways, and he got really bad press. He was also a sort of short game specialist, and he was outdriven by just about everyone he played, and that didn't go down very well. So so there were, you know, there were cartoons, there were murmurings, there were concerns about his putter, that they didn't like his putter, and you know, whether it contravened the rules, or you know, he putted everyone off the golf course at Royal St George's. But so yeah, that was a bombshell, really. In 1904, and I think it was very interesting, and you know, looking at what he went on to do in American golf, and the, you know, Garden City, and lots of other things. He achieved an awful lot in American golf, and I think he was unfairly given bad press by the people of the day, but a memorable champion.
Very good.
Illegal putter too.
Yeah, exactly. So but no, it was I can't remember who he beat in the final, but that eludes me, but yeah, big, you know, almost as, you know, not quite as unusual as Hilton winning the US Amateur, but you know, American golf just went whoosh in the, you know, I think starting with Weymouth, and then in 1913, and then it goes crazy, and we're left behind, and we're still catching up, I think. But
Well, thank you so much, Blake.
no, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Kurt, I see Kurt the Merciless. I see you up there. Before we get to Jim McCormick, what you got, Kurt?
Hey, Blythe, this is Kurt Fredrickson.
Hi, Kurt.
This is a Hoylake question rather than a Royal Liverpool question, so we'll see
Okay.
if this is out of bounds for you. But on my first trip there in 1997, for £5 in a junk shop there, I found what I thought was the perfect souvenir. This is a James Braid pointed-toed Mashie Niblick stamp for Haskins Hoylake.
Yeah.
And I know that Mr. Haskins was a one-armed golfer. I know that as a child he burned his father's shop down. I don't know anything else. I'm wondering if you know anything else.
Yeah, they were, I'm not, gosh, they were a sports dealer, I think, Haskins of Hoylake. And they were golfers, but they weren't golfers of note. But I think, you know, they may have stamped some clubs and sold them, you know, as they did at the time. They bought clubs and then sold them. There is a book called Haskins of Hoylake, which I would need to refer to, but I shall do some research and I shall find out more. Clubs are not my speciality. I'm more sort of books and pictures, but I will find out more and I shall get back to Ming the Merciless with all that information.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
That's okay.
Hey, Jim McCormick, I know you're in the same time zone as Blythe at the moment. So
Yeah, it's
Hi,
late
Jim.
too, by the way.
Hi,
I know
Jim.
it
Good to
is.
see you.
You were going to say something?
Here's my question. After seeing the 2006 Brown fairways, I believe it'll be nice and green this year, because I think if nothing else, the R&A has paid for all these championship courses to install irrigation. Is that true with Royal Liverpool?
Yeah, it's a sort of story in two halves in a way, because in 2006 our watering system was on its last legs, and it actually malfunctioned and broke down the day after the championship in 2006, and our greens we got to the stage where the day before the championship, the greens started the day at 11, and by the afternoon they were 14 and a half, and we really struggled. Some of them just got completely unplayable. I played on the day after the championship and to the same flags and the same tees as the players in 2006, and it was unplayable, completely unplayable with no water. So we had to redo our watering system, which I think we did. I'm just trying to think. It must be. We sort of repaired it a bit, but we completely upgraded it about 10 years ago. At not, you know, the R&A didn't pay the whole bill, nothing like it, but it was a big expense. But you need to be able to control your water. And we've had a very warm June this year, and we've used a lot of water. But the course is in great shape. It'll be very good for the championship.
Storms here the last couple of days, though, haven't you?
Yeah, it's been miserable. It's pretty miserable today.
But I said the course should be in great shape for those that don't know.
Yeah,
I would think
it is in great shape, and it'll be good for the championship. I'm sure. But you know, the one thing you can't control about an Open, you can't control the weather, and you can't control who wins. So those are both in the lap of the gods. So we'll keep our fingers crossed.
Indeed.
Bill Robertson, what did you got?
Hey, thanks, Blythe. Thanks very much.
It's a pleasure.
I wanted to ask a question, but anecdotal to the Walter Travis. I had the pleasure to play Cherry Hill today, site of the 1972 Canadian Open, and one of Travis's nice courses in our area.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cherry Hills.
Yeah, that's
in Canada.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interestingly, I'm going to Canada for the first time just after the Open, and I'm playing in Toronto Golf Club, St. George's, Royal Montreal. Never been to Canada, but I've heard it's fantastic, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, you'll enjoy it for sure.
Yeah.
My question was, how many spectators do they allow each day at Liverpool, so we can relate it to some of the tournaments over here?
it's something in the ballpark of 50,000 a day.
Wow.
So probably not quite 50,000 a day, but something along those lines. This year, there is a huge emphasis on hospitality, quite expensive hospitality. And they used to talk about tented villages, but we've got a tented city on the links at the moment. And there is, there's going to be a lot of people there. And a lot of people, will take advantage of this hospitality for the day, which so it'll be interesting. The open is, the open is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it is what it is now. But it's not the friendly sort of event in many ways. It's a corporate sports event. It's an international sports event. It's and the demands are increasing on the host clubs to host Open Championships. So I'm not saying it's not worth it, but it's been more challenging this time around, let's say.
Yeah, thank you very much.
That's okay.
Brian, go ahead. I see your hands up, and then maybe we'll do Nathan and get close to the end.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm a guest. And Blythe, great presentation. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you, Brian.
Could you mention anything you know about Geordie Low? He had a series of articles in the Forfar People's Journal, which he claimed that he had carried for Mr. Dunn at Carnoustie. And subsequently, when he went down to support George Morris, he met him and introduced himself again. And the man was pulling his hair out because he couldn't hit a pitch shot. And George took him out to the links and showed him how it was done, apparently.
Good to hear from you, Brian. George Lowe and George Morris. George Morris was quite a good player in his own right, and he actually had, I think he appeared in the Open Championship a couple of times and played in some of the early matches, but and he was the pro at Carnoustie, and I think it was Robert Chambers Senior who had a lot to do with the beginnings of Carnoustie in the 1840s, and he was one of the professionals there before he went into full-time service for Robert Chambers. But he was not really a golfer, and he didn't really make a living out of golf, unlike most of the Morrises, and certainly his son Jack Morris. But as a Forfarian, someone from Forfar, where I was born and brought up, I'll look into that and see if I can find any reference to that.
Good. I know where you practice your golf as well, on Forfar Muir.
That's right. Yeah, I used to get up there before school and hit shots before I went to school. But
amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Brian.
Nathan, give it a shot.
Dr. Bell, hope you're doing well.
I'm doing fine.
Hope you might talk a little bit about some of the display upgrades and things you guys did with the clubhouse in preparation for the tournament.
Okay, that's very interesting, Nathan. But it's great to see you actually. Well, my winter job was upgrading our displays and trophy cabinets for everyone coming to Hoylake this year. So we completely rebuilt and redesigned our trophy cabinets, and we got a designer. We got some new imaging. I don't have any pictures to show you, sadly. I thought that was a bit parochial and you wouldn't be too interested. But so it's fantastic, Nathan. Thanks. And when you visited me last year, you made a suggestion, and reposition one of our pictures, and I've done so, and it looks much better. And one of our cabinets we've sort of repurposed as a temporary cabinet, a sort of medium-sized one on the left. And this year, appropriately, it's going to be for it's about the Open Championship, because we're hosting the Open Championship, and so we've got clubs and balls from past champions, and we've got all the programs going back to 1930, and we got some artwork done by a designer that's really quite good, and the text is fantastic, as you can imagine. But the only thing, you know, we're talking about, and I thought, well, you can't really have an Open Championship display without the Open Championship trophy, and I tried to get one on loan for the year, but that proved impossible. So we've purchased a replica trophy, much against my better instincts, but it looks fantastic, and so yeah, it's all gone very well, and I'll send you some pictures.
Very nice.
I look forward to it.
How's things down in Georgia?
Hot, very, very hot.
Yeah.
We're closed for the summer, and yeah, no, our course is looking pretty similar to Tiger in 2006 there, so we're okay.
Yeah, it'd be great to play it in those conditions. It would be impossible.
It's a little different. It's a little different than April.
Great to see you.
Great to see you. Thanks for everything.
No, it's a pleasure.
Hello, Doug.
Hello. It's not so much a question. I just wanted to make sure the doctor read the private chat that I sent him regarding my good fortune of playing a round of golf at Royal Liverpool 25 years ago this year. I was able to play as a walk-on, and appreciate being allowed to play as a walk-on.
No, we're very welcoming.
Afterwards, you know, I enjoyed a beverage with the members I played with, and of course, I remembered the most important thing, and that is to remove my cap as soon as I entered the clubhouse.
Absolutely.
And enjoyed looking at the historical artifacts and pictures, and in the clubhouse, that's when I first heard of Harold Hilton.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that.
Go ahead.
Now, first of all, I just want to add a footnote to what you said about Arnold Massey's win. Actually, it was very popular in North Berwick, where I am, because he was the professional here in North Berwick.
Yes,
had been for a number of years. And when he came back with the claret jug, he was met at the railway station by Ben Sayers and a whole crowd of people, and they went right round the town in an open carriage, showing off the Open trophy to everybody. He was a very popular guy here, and his win was extremely popular. He was, and recently, within the last few years, his grave has been cleaned up and improved by the Fédération Française de Golf, of which I'm a member, incidentally. I'm researching a book about Fred McLeod, who's from North Berwick, a postman from North Berwick. Went to the US in 1903 and won the US Open in 1908. But before he did that, he played in the Amateur Championship in 1902 at Hoylake. He got knocked out in the third round by Charles Hutchings, who was a Royal Liverpool member. And but during what the account I have from the Liverpool Echo says that driving to the fourth hole, McLeod had the ill luck to hit the telegraph wire, and his ball travelled only about 20 yards. Has that telegraph wire featured similarly in any other event at Hoylake?
I don't think so. But there used to be a telegraph that our fifth hole, which is now Championship 7, is called Telegraph. and it's called Telegraph because there was a telegraph pole. And there used to be a line of communication that went from Hilbert Island to the mainland, if you like. And it went across the links, and it was called Telegraph. But it didn't really come into play. So he must have hit a pretty wild shot, I think. But it did traverse the links, and the fourth hole's now changed. It was a par 3, but that's interesting. But Charles Hutchings was captain of Royal Liverpool. He was originally from Warrington, but and he was I think he was the first grandfather to win the amateur championship. There you go.
That's what the newspaper account said. The captain said that he congratulated him on being the first grandfather. He was 53 at the time.
Yeah.
Apparently, he only took up, according to the accounts, he only took up golf at the age of 30.
Yeah.
And then, and won the amateur championship at the age of 53, which is pretty special.
Yeah, they were a moneyed family from Warrington. Warrington was a big sort of brewing, tannery, chemical town, and there was a lot of men did well there, and some of them were members at Hoylake. He never wore +4s or +2s. He was the one in the 1902 picture wearing normal trousers, so which is interesting as well. But very interesting. No, Charles Hutchings was a great man.
Right. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, Blythe, a testament to you is that my screen is still filled with live participants and at this juncture. So we thank you very, very much. And
no, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. It's been great fun. It's the first time I've sort of done something like this, but I've done a few things over the years, but nothing as special as this. It's been great fun, and thanks to everyone for their patience. Thanks to everyone who I know that's tuned in. It's been great fun.
Absolutely, we loved it. Thank you. Good night, all.
Okay, enjoy the Open.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Blythe.
Okay, it's a pleasure.
Thanks so much.